In this video here, we're going to kind of extend our knowledge on the visualization aspect within CODESYS. And we're going to look at a bit more an advanced technique in where we're displaying kind of data strings and values that are happening instantaneously or kind of, throughout time in the project. So what I'm doing here is I've just logged in and I'm going to run the project just so you can kind of get an idea of what's happening. So I have a start button here that as I sort of trigger it, we have a counter and it's showing me the value of my current count. If I press my stop button, it's going to reset my counter. Now my counter is counting up to a value of 10, I believe. So when we get to 10, you'll see a green light come on, and what that does is it triggers a timer that counts to 20 seconds. And you'll see our time is being displayed as we're working through, 12 seconds, and that will count up to 20, and it will go ahead and reset my system. So you see the light's gone off, count's gone back down to 0, and then I'd have to start triggering my sequence again. So we're getting a view of what's happening throughout the project as we're going. If we hit the stop button, that should stop everything. Okay. So this is what we're trying to really show. In this video, we're learning how to kind of display these data values. So if I log back out of my project, now there's a piece of code. I'll show it to you here. I've declared some variables. I'm not going to run through how to set up the code. All it is setting up a up counter and a timer. Okay, there's a bit of memory there that helps us reset. It's a timer on delay, but you should be able to do that yourself. The main things we're going to use from this project though to display the values is that CV, that current value. So I've just declared a variable called C1 that's going to allow me to access that current value. So that's where the data is stored. And again, for the elapsed time, as the time is going, I have a variable called T1. It's going to store that information, and we can use that then in our visualization to access it. So how do we go about doing this? Right? Well, there's a couple of things that's here in the visualization. Now, I've shown you how to add in push buttons that can interact. So we've seen that in previous videos, so we're not just going to set them up again. So they are, there's a dip switch that I've dragged in for my start, I did a push switch for my stop, and I have a lamp that's sitting, and you can see it. All I've done is I've just sat that lamp right on top of an image. Okay, and I'll show you how to bring in the image in a second. So all I've done with those variables, with those buttons, visualization buttons, is I've linked them to a variable. So we've seen here I've linked them to my start button in the program underneath variable, and the same with the stop, I've linked it to the stop. Alright, I've put in a little text display just to show me the start and stop, and I've added some color. So we've all kind of properties here that we can change its size, change the color, depending on the particular item. You have options to change its properties. Same with the text box. I was able to go ahead into the text properties and change some of the font, etc. Okay, so that's okay hopefully. Now what I've done here is I have a lamp and I have a text box that's going to display the value of the counter. Okay, so you see them two in isolation. That's just a text box, and that's a lamp I've dropped in. And what I have here is I have an image of a counter. Alright, so the first thing is, how do we get these images in? Well, what you need to do is you need to get an image first. So whether you're taking a physical picture or you're downloading the picture from the image from the internet, you have to do that and save it onto your computer. Then what we need to do is we need to add in this image pool into our application. So how you do that is you right click, you're adding an object, and you're adding an image pool. So that creates ultimately a pool of images that we can attach to this project. So you'll see I have them here. So if you want to add in a new image, all you do is under file name, you double click in here, and you can search for the image. Now make sure you want to embed it into the project. and we can search our computer. It will link up, you know, that kind of browse for the file. So wherever it's saved in, you know, make sure it's like a JPEG or a bitmap or something like that type file type, and then you can add it in and embed it into your project. So that's what I've done with my two images here. I've added them into the image pool, and that allows me then to be able to access it for my visualization. So I've put in an image of a timer, or sorry, of a counter, and I've also put in an image of a timer. And then what I've done is I've created, so if you, well, actually before I show you the text box, just then once you have them embedded in the image pool, it's very easy to then actually go ahead and drag in the image, because what you do is go into basic, drag in image, and then if you look here, you can search in your categories under image pool, and there it is, and you can bring that ultimately in to your project. Now, just can be slightly difficult to see here, so you'll need to select it, and then down the bottom here click OK, and it brings in the image, and then you can resize it and do whatever needs to be done. So what I want to do is I want to display a text box, just I want to sit it on top of it, okay? And sometimes it might sit behind it, so sometimes you need to right click on the text box and go to its order and make sure you bring that to the front, so that sits in front of your timer image. And the same here, I've put again a text box is just going to sit there, and just a little lamp, hang on, then just a little lamp to sit on top, just to kind of turn on to say when my counter has reached its maximum limit. Alright, so you can design these any way you want. You know, I've just taken the image. You could use physical images that you've actually physically gone and taken and then edit them. You could put your actual push buttons on top of these, you know, symbols for push buttons or whatever. You can play around with the visualization, it's yours. So the key really in this video is how do we link that to the data values that we have in here so we can access it. Well, if we look in the text box, right, and what you're going to do is you're going to go into text variables, okay, and you'll see in here I've linked it to that C1 value. So I've gone in here, I've gone into my application, my project, and I've gone into the C1 value, so it's a word value, so I know the type it is as well, which is important. And the T1 value is the time, okay. If you wanted to, you know, if you didn't want to use it as a stored variable, you could probably get access to it in here, that ET value. Same in here with the CV value, but we've stored it, makes it much neater to store it as a variable. So we've assigned the variable name C1 and T1. Now the type it is important. So we'll see the C1 is a word, so that's like a string that's coming in, and then we have a time value coming in. So we have to set up a particular code or reference to allow us to tell ultimately the system that we're bringing in the case for the text, we're bringing in a string. So we've linked it to the variable, and now what our text is going to do is we press %, or we type in percentage and make sure it's a small s. That stands for a string. We're going to import the string from that variable. Okay, so we know there's a word in that variable C1, and we're going to display the string of that. Okay, so that's what the percentage s is. In here for the timer, we do something slightly different. Okay, again, we put in the text variable, we've linked it to that T1 value, and the text we're going to display, okay, if you can see it at there, it's going to be percentage %t, and percentage %t tells us we're representing the time value. Okay, and then how we're going to display that time, well, if you type in, so we've square brackets, and then we have for minutes, and that will bring in our minutes, and then SS will bring in how many seconds are on the timer. But the other way we want to display it is we want to have just a little bit of our own text beside it. M to represent minutes and S to represent seconds, so that we can actually kind of make it a bit more user friendly, right? And maybe I haven't explained that well, but let's just look at it, right? Let's say if I took off, if I take off the M and I take off this S, right? Watch what happens to display now when I go to run my project. Okay, so if I press play and then I go through the operations just to get it to 10, Okay, it's lost that kind of telling me that this is the minutes section and that this is the seconds. We don't really know what it's counting there. Okay, so you'll see now all that's doing is it's importing the values. What I'll do is I'll just reset our system there. And so what's that doing is I just resetting the values, but to make it that bit more user friendly or kind of user visible, what we do is we put in that bit of text, and we have to put them texts in as comments. You know, I could even put in min. So you put them in with the you know, little apostrophe there, because this is the text we are typing in. The rest we are importing in from the variable. So this is what we're typing in just to help the display. So we're importing in the minutes of our time. So coming from that time, because we know it's stored as a time variable, so we're accessing the time variable, and we're just taking the minutes, many minutes is being displayed, the mm, and we're taking the seconds, the ss. Okay, and then we're putting a little bit of text beside that. So you'll see now that the box might not be big enough, but you'll see I've got 0 minutes and 0 seconds. So we can play around with how we want to represent or display that information. So we can go back to the way we had it, just the M to represent minutes and the S really just to represent, there we are, the seconds. And then that should bring us back, bring us back to a kind of standard display that we're looking for. There it is, 0 minutes, 0 seconds. So there's a couple of things in this video, how we're linking it to ultimately data that's in our project. So we looked at words and we looked at time values, and that helps us display it. We could be displaying just numbers, like real numbers, floating point numbers. There's a lot of different variables that we can access, integer type, datas, all sorts. So there's different types of codes that we will need when we're doing that. As you've seen, percentage %s for a string, percentage %t for a time variable. You know, there'll be a document published giving you all them codes, and you'll become familiar with them as you use more of them. Some of them are the same, you know, in Siemens as they are, in Mitsubishi as they are, in CODESYS, but some of them are slightly different. So it's not that you need to learn them off, you just need to be able to access them. And then knowing, I suppose, how you can put in minutes and seconds, type in your own comments, and access that as well to get a really nice display. So have a go at doing that. You know, you can pause the screen and get access to the code there just to see what I've used. You know, set up your own code, import your own images, just set up that image pool, develop a nice visualization that's ultimately interactive. You know, there's a strong link to what we're doing here, as there is if you were setting up a HMI display, and that we can get access not only to our inputs and outputs, but we can get access to the data that's being stored in our structure or in our project as well.